I do think that there's a slim chance that you pull some people off, but someone, and it was David Jolly, who is a former Republican congressman who I think has denounced his Republicanism, who is now an MSNBC contributor. He pointed something out, and this goes to one of our long running questions that we keep asking. You know what he said? He said you won't realistically. He could see it happening, but he says that the five Republicans, if there are five Republicans or more that come over, they're gonna be former Republicans. That the Democrats would have to provide space for them to leave the party, and because the reality is that if if not, you have two situations where let's look at a Don Bacon. I'm kind of partial to Don Bacon, just so you know. I found out I went to school with his brothers. I was actually out one night drinking with one of my friends. He's like, Don Bacon's my older brother. I'm like, what? Um, and Don has been a very, by whatever standards, moderate. But what David Jolly was saying is, you would have to, with any Republicans, you would have to make space for them to join the Democratic Party because one, they would be primaried. Two, if they're not primaried, they have no guarantee that you're not going to run someone against them. So, I think, you know, what David, and I don't know what type of discussions are being had, but David Jolly says realistically, what you're doing is you wouldn't merely get Republicans to vote for Hakeem. You'd have to go with a little bit more of a substantive sell and not just steal them, but you'd have not just steal their votes. You'd have to steal them, and actually put them in your party. And the reason why I say this is something we've talked about before is in some seats, might we be better off with a former Republican that will win and can hold on to that seat? Because and do we need to create space for a few pro-life Democrats? Do we need to create space for a few pro-amendment? Obviously, Quaylar down in Texas is all that, and that's why the far right comes after him. But if it helps us get the majority, um, and I know what you're saying about 24, but let's just say forget 24. Just realistically, do you think that with the Republican Party going so far right and some districts not being gettable or being swingy, do we potentially need to make space for former Republicans? And that space includes some Republicans who might be pro-life. That space. Now I think you can be responsibly pro-life, by the way, and some Republicans who could actually be pro-Second Amendment or pass it. What are your thoughts on that?
I think here's what I think. I think this is going to sound crazy, John, but I think a majority of Republicans are pro-choice. I just think that the far right of the party would oust them if they came out and said that because the majority of the country is pro-choice. I think I think the number is 76% of the country just didn't want to overturn Roe v. Wade. They just wanted to stay as it is. They didn't necessarily want to push legislation and make abortion much more common, but they just thought it should be left as it was, right? And I think a lot of Republicans probably feel the same way. But the problem, John, is what you were already mentioning, right? If they come over to our side, they probably just lose their seat anyways, whether it's in a purple swingy district or not. They're just probably going to get primaried and lose their seat. It's similar to what's happening to Cinema in the Senate, right? It's like she's kind of threatening to say, hey, I could caucus with the Republicans. You guys lose your majority, but she might lose her seat anyway. So it's a moot point, right? That's what ends up happening to these House members probably is you have to toe the line. And I think a lot of them are learning now that you could win an election without Trump. You don't necessarily have to be anti-Trump, but you could just pitch your message and don't have to do into the Trumpism stuff, and you could probably still keep your seat. But if you fully go against the party, then you're probably going to not win your seat. Also, John, the numbers are there, right? Like, what if George Santos isn't a congressman in a couple months? And what if there's a health matter with another congressman? All of a sudden, you just don't have the majority, anyways, right? Um, they're so close to losing it that they've already lost it, if that makes sense. They don't have the nuance and the nimbleness of someone like Nancy Pelosi, who could have historic legislation of a slim majority. So I don't know. I get your point, and I think we would make room for them if they were reasonable enough. Like, I think if Adam Kinzinger said, "Hey, I want to be a Democratic kind of congressman from Illinois," I think generally speaking we would be okay with that. Um, but Kinzinger is a different case. He's very vocal, and those other people are just not. They're just trying to play it safe.